Hi everyone, this is Michelle from MaMi's Country Quilts. Welcome back to our virtual classroom. Today we are tackling a Judy Niemeyer quilt called Fractured Star, but we're going to put our twist on this pattern. So the one that you see here is our sample. So basically what we've done is we've taken Judy's pattern for the Fractured Star, and instead of using 2.5-inch strips in a belly pop format or a jelly roll format, we have done the star using an ombre. So we're going to show you how to do that today. Before we get started though, for those of you who haven't done a Judy Niemeyer pattern, I'm just going to go over a few things that you need to know and be aware of before we get started. So for this pattern, you need the pattern from Judy Niemeyer from Quiltworx, the Fractured Star, and this can be purchased on our website at mamisquilts.com. And you'll also need an addendum that we wrote, calling Fracturing Star, written by us to deal with this application of the ombre fabric in this pattern. So you need those two patterns. And now I'm just gonna go over a few things with you before we get started. So first of all, for the fabric requirements, because we're using an ombre, we only need one fabric for the star, and we're using a Stonehenge Gradations ombre for this version. So we're using this fabric here, and for our background and for the outer border and for the binding, as well as the sashing strips in between your star, we are using a midnight blue fabric for that. Now this will obviously change. You can see here that we've used a different binding on this one, and that's just because we used a light background. I typically don't like to use a light binding, so I just chose a darker binding for this one. So that's just an option. There's no right or wrong to that. You just do whatever you like the best. And you'll notice as well the border stripe is different from what's shown in Judy's pattern. There's a Roman border application in this pattern. We are actually just using the ombre to do that little stripe, that little border. Okay, so you just need the two fabrics when you're doing this version with the dark. Again, if you're using a light background, you'll probably want to use a dark fabric for the sashing, but that's all things you can decide when you're picking your fabric. So from there, I'm just going to go through some things in Judy's pattern. So when you pull out the pattern part instructions from Judy's pattern, you'll see in the first page she has some general information. She talks about the newsprint, which is the paper that we're going to be using to cut the fabric and to sew on. It's all on newsprint. She has what should be in your pattern listed here. So she's saying that the NP 561 page, you should have 6 of those. You should have 1 page of the NP 569, 1 of the TP 375, 6 of the NP 562, and 1 of the NP 570. So that's one of the things that when I pick up one of Judy's patterns, I always make sure that I have all the newsprint necessary to do the pattern, and we'll go through that in a second here. I'm just going to carry on and talk about this layout. And the nice thing about Judy's patterns is when you pick up one of her patterns, the first page typically looks the same from one pattern to the next. So there's not a lot of relearning as far as layout and how she's setting up her pattern. There's lots of repetition in that, which is very, very nice. The corrections section that she's talking about here just talks about if there's been corrections made to the pattern after they've released it. They have a corrections page on their website. You can scan this QR code here and go there directly, or you can just go to the Quiltworx site, go to the products page and find the corrections. The patterns are all listed in alphabetical order, and if there's a change made, she'll take a snapshot of the page that requires a correction, and that will be in red. So it's very easy to see what's been changed. Okay, supply list. So there's a few things that are paper piecing specific as far as tools are concerned. the most important, of course, is the add-a-quarter ruler. And there's two sizes that we use typically, and that's the 12-inch and the 18-inch ruler. For this one, I use both, because when you're starting, you don't have very big pieces, so the big ruler is cumbersome. But by the time you get to the outside edge of your diamond, it's getting fairly long, and the 12-inch tends to be a little bit short. So I always have those ones on hand. The other thing that you're going to need is a folding template, and we make our own here at MaMi's. So they're in different sizes, and again, that's because not all units are the same size. So when you're dealing with a smaller unit, you want a smaller one. When you're dealing with a longer unit or a bigger unit, you want a bigger one. And then we have a washout glue stick, and the Fons & Porter is still my favorite one. It goes on easy, it's not gunky, and it comes off with a warm cloth if you get it where you don't want it. So it's not a permanent glue, which is what you want. So that's what we use for that. For this project, we will be using 4 or 5 bags, and I like to use the extra large bags just so that I don't have to fold my papers so small. And again, that varies with whatever project you're doing. You might want to use various sizes of bags for that. And then one tool that I use that's not anywhere in the patterns is a stapler. And basically the stapler for me replaces pins. Especially when I'm cutting out templates, I prefer to staple my template to my fabric. This way I know it doesn't move, especially if I'm cutting 2 or 3 templates at a time. So it's just for accuracy. You'll need your cutters, of course. I have my fabric cutter, and because we're going to be cutting paper out, I don't like to use a scissor. I find it a lot faster using a rotary blade to do that. So I just use my old blades that aren't cutting fabric very well anymore. I put those in my paper cutter, and I use that for my paper cutting. So I have one designated for paper and one for fabric. The other thing that we need are going to be paper clips, which I have here, and we use the bigger ones, and we use the coated ones. We kind of steer clear from the metal ones in case a project gets put to the side for a while and you don't touch it for a while. The metal ones, if you're in a situation where it's damp or humid, can leave rust on your fabric. So we use the plastic coated paper clips for that reason. And other than that, you'll need your other sewing supplies, of course, your rulers, your pins, whatever else that you use, rotary cutter, seam ripper, and such for sewing. So with that, we will move on. So in your package for the Fractured Star from Judy, you're going to have the instructions, you'll have your cover page, and then you'll have the newsprint. All right, so I was talking about the different pages, and we're just going to sort those out right now. So you'll see here there's a bunch of LP pages, and that's for the assembly. So we're not going to need those right away. We're just going to put those back in our package, and then we're going to pull out. So these are big pages. So NP stands for newsprint. So your NP 561, there should be 6 of those pages. So you just want to make sure that everything is there. And I've gone through mine and I know that they're all there. So I'm just going to separate them out here. 561, 562, 562. They're all the same weight. This one's 562. I've already counted mine, but just so you can go through it, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have the 6, 562, and we have the 6, 561. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so we've got those, and then you have your 569. So this bundle there's going to be a variety of different pages. So we need 1/569, which is on top here. And then we have 1/570, and we have a TP. So NP stands for newsprint, TP stands for template. So on this page, it's strictly templates, which means that we're going to be using those to cut fabric. Okay, NP typically means you're going to be using the units on here you're going to be sewing on those. And the way you can tell the difference is that if you're sewing on something, it'll have a unit name. So that this one says unit B1, this one says unit A. That means you're going to be sewing on that. That's a unit that you need to construct in order to make your pattern. Okay, if you look at the templates, there's no unit label on any of these. It'll just say T template or template layout sheet on those pieces. So that means it indicates that you need to use that to cut your fabric out in order to construct your units. Okay. So now that we know that we have all of our papers, we're just going to go ahead and cut these out. So for the units, so anything that's labeled unit, you want to cut 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch away from the outside of your unit. And that means the whole unit. Okay, you're not cutting these apart. Like, don't cut all these in little pieces, because then we're going to have an issue, which can be resolved, but it'll just complicate things. So on this NP 569, you have 3 big shapes that you're going to be cutting out. So we're going to do that in a second here. So on your NP 570, you have a combination of templates and of units. So for your units, you're going to be cutting again 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch around the whole unit. So you've got 1 unit on this page, and on this one you have templates. Now typically we cut the templates right on the line, but for a T-temp, so that's a T-temp plate label right here and right here, we're going to cut the same as the unit. We're going to cut about 1/4 of an inch away, because I find it easier to cut. We're going to be putting this on fabric. I find it easier to cut it out that way than if it's exactly on the line. So we're going to do that as well. And then of course the bottom page here, your TP 375 is all T-temps. So again, we're just going to cut about 1/4 of an inch around all of those. So I'm going to just show you how to do that. And then I'm going to go and cut all of my papers and I'll be back. But before I go, I'm going to just show you how to get going on this. So I'm going to show you how to do one of these combination ones here. So I'm going to grab this guy. And to cut this out, I'm using my paper cutter, and I'm just using a straight edge. So it can be any ruler. I typically like this kind of a shape of a ruler, narrower and longer. I just find it easier to use. And because I have my outer quarter ruler right handy, that's what I'm going to use. I can also use the 1/4 inch gap right here, or edge, to just quickly measure approximately 1/4 of an inch. So this doesn't have to be exactly 1/4 of an inch away from the outside, approximately. So that's why I like this ruler. It's just very easy to see on here. And then I'm just going to cut. And again, this is just very quick cutting. Once you've done a few of these, you'll see that you're going to get way faster at it and not be worried about it being very precise. I'm just going to turn this around. So I'm just measuring about 1/4 of an inch from the outside. Just sliding my ruler up. So this this is 1 unit. So I'm just going to put all of my unit B1s together as I'm cutting them. I'll put them all in one pile. And then for your templates, you're doing the exact same thing for your T-temps. So you're just going to be cutting, and I'm just going to cut right in the center of these two because there's not a lot of room in between. So I'm just going to cut all the way around. And again, your T-temps can all go into one pile for right now. And then I'm just going to keep cutting this one out. So these two templates right here, the Unit B accent strip piecing template B2 and the Unit B diamond strip piecing template B1, we will not need this because we are not using the Roman border. So you're going to just put that to the side, actually along with your Unit B, because we are not using the Roman border sheets. So we're not going to be using these ones here. So we're not using the Roman border in this area. So these are all just going to go into one pile, and we're just going to tuck them away because we're not using them in this quilt. All right, so we're just going to keep cutting these out. So again, when there's not a lot of space in between here, I'm just cutting right in the center. Okay, so that one goes there. So as well as with these ones here, this template will not be used either. This is for the outer border. And because we're not constructing that exactly like Judy is, we will not be needing this part. I'm just going to cut it out so it's not so bulky. And these are things that you can just put to the side. They can be used somewhere along the way. If you're doing something that requires a Roman border, you can definitely use that. I'm just going to get rid of this. All right, so we've got that going on. So again, so the NP 569 you can cut and put with your other ones. I'm going to do mine in a bit. Same thing with these. You're going to cut these just like I cut these T-temps out. And I'm going to go and cut mine. And then I'm just going to go over these guys. So your 562, you have 6 of these. So I'm just going to go over a couple ways to do this. When I'm teaching this, I teach both ways. You can stack, whenever you have a number on your paper, like NP 562, and you have multiple sheets, you can actually stack and cut. Now, a lot of people don't like doing that, which is fine. You can do them individually for the units only. You can't do that for the template pieces just because we're cutting on the line on the template layout sheets. So this is slightly different than the ones that we cut here. These were T-temps. These are template layout sheets. So on the template layout sheets, we are cutting right on the line, on the very outside line. So that means that there's not a lot of wiggle room to make a mistake. So we don't, when we stack, we don't cut those out. So for this, for the 562, because we have half templates and half units, I would just do mine individually. I find that faster. So I would just cut one page at a time. So I'm just going to show you how to do that one. So again, for the units, so we have unit A twice on this paper, we're just going to cut 1/4 of an inch away from the outside line. And you can see here that I just eyeballed that, that's fine. Okay, so we're going to just cut like that. The other thing too, when you're cutting with a lot of paper around you like this, you have to make sure that some of these don't get caught underneath so that you're cutting through. It's very easy to do. I'm just going to narrow this up a little bit. So you can see here that I'm pretty much sticking to my 1/4 inch or a little bit less. You don't want a lot more because that affects how you see what when you're putting your fabric on when you're trying to assemble your unit. So there are 24 of these unit A's. So as you're cutting them, just make 3 piles of 8 right off the bat, and then I'll show you how to bag those when we come back, when all of our papers are cut. Okay, so for the rest of the 562 page, we have 3 template layout sheets. So these ones you're going to be cutting right on the outside line or just beyond, so that you're not actually cutting your line off. So we're going to do that. I'm going to turn it this way. Okay, so again, these ones, there are 3 different ones, so just pile all of them in their respective piles. So you'll have the unit A sheet 1, then you'll have sheet 2, and you'll have sheet 3. So that's sheet 1 there. So you'll make a pile with all of your sheet 1s on them. This is sheet 3, so there's going to be a pile of those. And then the last one here is going to be sheet 2. So when you're done cutting all of your MP 562s, there's 6 of those sheets, so you'll have 6 papers in each pile for your template layout sheets. And you'll have 12 of these units cut out. So again, just put them in piles of 8 as you're going. So that's the 562. So for the 561, I'm going to show you how to stack and cut that, just so you can see how that works. And again, if you're not comfortable doing that, just go ahead and do it 1 page at a time, like I just finished doing with the 562. I'm just going to move these out of the way here. And I'm going to grab some pins. So I'm going to move my 562s out of the way. And I'm going to grab my 561s. So there are 6 of these. So you can see here that you have numbers in your corners. So you have 1, you have 2 in this corner, and then you have your labels in this corner. So when you're stacking, and again, this number has to be the same on all of your pages to do this. So you want to make sure all the number 1s are in the same corner. So I'm just going to double check that 1. We've got 1 and 1, and 1 and 1. And I'm just going to kind of get them together here in a straight pile. Now, unfortunately, we can't just do this and assume it's going to be exactly where it's supposed to be. These pages are going through big printers, so they can kind of twist and turn a little bit when you're printing. So what we're going to do is use a technique that we use for the stack and whack. We're going to find a specific point in your paper, and I steer away from the very outside because I'm going to be cutting there. So I'm not going to put a pin right here because it's going to be in my way. I'm going to pick somewhere inside my unit so that I can cut without removing my pin. So I'm going to take this point right here. I'm going to put my pin through that. Then I'm going to find the exact same point in my second paper. So it's going to be right here. In my third paper. And in my fourth. And my fifth. And my sixth. So I'm going to just put my pin like that, and then I'll find another point at the opposite side of my paper. I don't know if you can still see me. So again, I'm just going to pick a point inside. So I'm just going to pick this point right here. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So just put your pin straight up and down, and just put your pin through like that. So now I know that these units are basically one on top of one another, underneath each other here. So again, we only have 2 of the unit A's on this paper, and then we have templates, but we're just going to cut these out. So once you've got a couple points set up, if my whole page was to be cut out like this, I would find a point here and a point here, but because these are templates, we can't do that. So I'm just going to cut that portion off. So I'm just going to cut this off here. And then I'm just going to move these away. You can press your papers out if you want to. Just don't put steam when you do that, because then it'll curl your paper up. So once I have my 2 points or my 4 points for a whole page in place, I can just go ahead and pin now. I don't have to find more exact points because it's pretty much set up where it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to put some pins to kind of get every corner of my unit. This way, when I'm cutting, it's not going to move on me. And when you're doing this, you want to use your flathead, your pins, versus a round head, because when you're putting your ruler on here, it's going to be easier with a flathead pin than a glass head. So again, I'm just going to cut this apart 1/4 of an inch from the outside. So you can see when you have a lot of paper to cut, this technique really speeds it up because I'm cutting 6 units at a time right now rather than one. And you'll find that you'll float between the two techniques. Some people find it takes too long to set up, so they just like to do one at a time. But the more you do it, the faster you get at it. So this one, and I'm just gonna trim that off. So I have 6 units here. So I'm going to take these 2 units, put them with these 6, and that's one pile of 8. So I'm going to put that to the side. So same thing with this one. We only have 2 pins or 1 pin on here right now. I'm going to pin my other points. And then I'm just going to cut around. So when I'm stacking, I for sure cut the 1/4 inch around just to make sure I have a little bit of wiggle room in case it's not right on. So I'm going to cut that. All right, so we have another 6 units cut. Just gonna cut that off. And cut that off so I can take, and I always take my pins off right away because I really don't like sticking myself with them. So I have another 6 here. I'm going to leave those in a second pile. And as I'm cutting the rest of my 5/62s, I'm going to add 2 more to make another pile of 8 and then carry on. So that's for the unit A's. So now for your, I'm going to use, these fold templates are great for picking up paper. So these guys, that's the other half of the 561, are also template layout sheets. So you're going to be cutting on the line. And we only need 3 of these, so we don't have to cut them all out. We're just going to use half of them. So we're just going to take 3 of these papers. And the other ones we're not going to need, so we're just going to put those there. And again, same thing, you're going to be cutting these right on the line, and we're just going to cut the big shape for now. So you're cutting these long rectangles out. Alright, so then you're just going to cut the ends off of here. Like that. And like that. So you're going to have 3 of these ones. And then we'll have 3 of, I'm just going to cut this down right away. You're going to have 3 of these, and you'll have 3 of this last one. again, you're cutting very close to the outside line here. I'm just cutting a little bit beyond. So you'll have 3 of these. And once you have all that cut, you'll be done cutting your paper. So I'm just gonna go finish cutting my paper and then I'll be back. Hi everyone, I'm back with my papers all cut out, ready to go for a project. And I'm just gonna go through how to organize those papers to keep ourselves organized. So we need 3 of the Ziploc bags that you have from your supply list. Again, I'm using the extra large. If you have a smaller size, that's totally fine. You just need to fold things up a little bit more is all. So what we're going to do is take those 3 bags and we're going to label them bag number 1, bag number 2, and bag number 3. So the first thing we're going to do is take our A1 units, so that's these big diamonds, so you should have 8 in one pile. So you're going to put 8 of these papers into each of bags 1, 2, and 3. Okay. We're going to take another bag for our background pieces, so our background templates. So you should have 6 template pieces, and if you look at the label in the center of your template, you'll have one that says CR1, one that says CR2, which is a little bit bigger, and the biggest one will say CR3, and then it'll repeat for the left side. So R is for right, L is for left, so you'll have CL1, CL2, and CL3. So we're going to take those and put those all into one bag, and we're going to label that bag background templates. Put that aside. Now you should have remaining will be your template layout sheets 1, 2, and 3 for Unit A accent, and then you'll have your Unit A background templates 1, 2, and 3 sheets. So those we'll be using shortly. What you have remaining are a T-temp C4 and a T-temp C5. We will not be using that, as well as these ones, which I think I mentioned already once. So your B2 and B1 templates we will not be using. And then the unit foundation B, units B1, B2, and B3 sheets we will not be using. So those can just be folded up and put, I just keep them with my pattern. So just put them back into your pattern bag. So this one here, I just stick this back in here. It goes with the pattern. At some point down the road, you may come up for a use for that. And then I'll also put my LP 026 sheets back in that bag as well, because that's what we're going to use that for the final assembly of the quilt. So we have pretty much everything ready to go. These sheets we're going to use with our background fabrics. So for me, that's going to be the dark blue. For this is for the sashings in between. We don't need those just right yet, so I'm just going to put those over here. And then we're going to talk about these ones here before we get into the cutting of the ombre fabric. So because we are not following Judy's pattern to cut the fabrics using these template layout sheets, we are going to cut these apart actually, and that is not the norm. So this is not something that you would normally do. This is just for when you're doing our version of the fractured star using the ombre fabric, or if you're doing the 4 or 8 fractured star fabric, which is also in the same addendum here for the fractured star. So if you're doing Judy's pattern, exactly like Judy's doing it, then you don't cut these apart. But for ours, you will be cutting these apart. So you're going to take these sheets and you're just going to cut the sections apart. So that was section 3. This little triangle with the cross hatching on it is just a scrap piece, so we're just going to toss that out. And then you'll cut section 5 and 1 apart. So we're just going to make piles. So we've got section 1, section 3, section 5, and you have 3 each of those, so we're going to cut those right quick. The 1 with the 1, 5 with the 5, and 3 with the 3. Okay, so section 1, so we have those 3 done. Then we'll take our next sheet. This one only has 2 pieces, so we're just going to cut on the cut line here. So again, we're going to put, this is 13, so we'll put the 13s together and the 9s together. And then we'll cut these guys apart. So again, I'm just cutting on where it says cut line number 1 on your sheet right here. I'm just cutting right on that line. And this one we have 11 and 7. I'm going to put 7 up here, and we'll have 11 and 13 here. Okay, so those we're going to use to cut our ombre fabric. So I'm just going to move these out of the way here. Move those out of the way, and now we're just going to grab, so in your addendum patterns, that's the part that we wrote, we're using the ombre version. So you're going to grab that page number 1, and we're just going to follow what it says here. So the first thing it tells us to do is to cut our border pieces off of our ombre fabric, which is going to be from the width of the fabric. So we're going to cut 8 2-inch strips. So I'm just going to open this up. So again, this is going to be width of fabric. Okay, so I'm going to use my 24-inch ruler. I think I'm going to move these out of the way here before they all fly away. All right, so we need 8 strips that are 2 inches wide. Just make sure I've got 1 layer. Then I'm going to use my square to square this up. So I'm just going to take off the least possible here off the edge of my fabric. So I'm just running a straight line through my fold, which is at the bottom here. So just butt my 24-inch ruler up against my square, then move this to the side. And I am going to take my fabric cutter and just square that off. So once you've got that squared off, you're going to cut 8 2-inch strips. So I'm going to use, So my 2-inch line is on the edge of my fabric and I'm square on the bottom. All right, so now I have my 8 strips. So you're gonna grab another bag here and we're going to label this one borders. So I'm just going to put on here borders. And I'm going to put that in there. All right, and we'll put that to the side because we'll just need this right at the end when we're assembling the quilt. Okay, so now what we're going to do is start cutting our strips for the star, the diamond units, unit A. And to do that, we are cutting on the length of the fabric. So we're turning our fabric and we're going to be cutting this way rather than across the width of the fabric. So the first thing we're going to do is cut off our selvage. And we're going to start cutting from the dark fabric. So you can see here that, and to do this, your ombre has to run from light to dark, from selvage to selvage. So I'm just going to fold this. You can fold this a couple times because it's going to be long. Okay, so we've got our fabric folded and we're going to start cutting from the dark side. So what you want to make sure here is that your fabric is right, one on top of the other. Okay, so I'm just gonna show you what I'm doing here. So I'm looking at my pattern. So what we're doing is cutting 2.5 inch strips. So we're going to cut 11 by the length of the fabric from the dark side, and then we're going to cut 4 from the light side, just so that we have that really nice contrast in the center here for those 3 sections right here. Okay, and as we're cutting these strips, we're going to label them from 1 to 15, because we're going to end up with 15 strips, 11 from this side, 4 from that side, because we want to make sure we keep them in order, and we're going to put them in their correct bags as we carry on. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is cut my selvages off. So again, you can see that it's not going to be straight up here, which is fine. I'm using my fold at the bottom here as my straight line. So I'm just going to see, this is probably still not long enough, so I'm just going to fold this up one more time here, about halfway up, so that I'm on my fabric. And you can fold this right up to the top if you want. I'm just going to do it that way. So nice and straight. There's no wrinkles anywhere. I'm just going to put this up here so we can label as we go here. All right, so we're going to cut our selvages off first. So I'm just going a little bit past the white. You want to make sure it's all off. And we're cutting 2.5-inch strips. So I'm going to turn this. So I've got a half on this ruler. So then my line, I'm using my 2.5-inch line here on the edge of my fabric. So I'm cutting 2.5. And we're going to label those as we go. So this one is going to be strip number 1. I'll cut it in half. That's strip number 2. There's a couple here on the label. Okay, so we're going to label these. This is number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So we need 6 more from this side. Okay, so this is 6, 7, 8, 9. And I was underlining 6 to make sure you got the right numbers. So need 2 more. 10. Okay, so this is going to be 10 and 11. Alright, so I'm just going to stack these up like this so that my number 1 is going to be on top. Okay, so we need 4 strips from the light side. So I'm just going to turn this way. And again, we're just going to square that up. So I'm just going, or take my selvages off, I should say, which I'm cutting square. Okay, so we're cutting these. So your lightest strip is going to be strip number 15. So this is going to be strip 15. All right, we need 1 more. Okay, so this is going to be extra. So we finished with strip 11 over there, so we need to label these guys. Actually, I'm going to put that up here. So this is going to be strip number 12. This is going to be 13. This is going to be 14. And this is going to be 15, because you want your last strip should be your lightest strip. So 1's your darkest, 15 is your lightest. So I'm just going to stack those back up this way. And then this goes here. So now we're ready to start cutting for our different sections for our unit A. So this is just an extra piece, and this can go into another bag as well, where you just have for extra pieces. you can set that up. And we're just going to follow the next instructions where it says cut and bag. We're going to take strip number 1. And again, we have a diagram of this on the back of the cover sheet. So we're following this diagram right here. This is for the other 2 versions of the pattern. So we're doing ombre version, cutting for unit A. So here you can see we have strip number 1 down to 15. That's how we cut it on the ombre with a section in the center that we're not using. Okay, so that's the diagram. So for strip number 1, we're going to cut our section 13. So we're cutting 8 section 13s from strip number 1, from strip number 2, and from strip number 3. So I'm just going to show you how we're going to set this up, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting because it's going to take some time to cut this. Okay. All right, so what we need to do with our templates here is create the angle that we need so that we can just nest our strip. So I'm just going to add 3/4 of an inch from the dotted line. So I'm measuring 3/4 of an inch over from that dotted line, the dashed line right here. So I am just going to, and the reason I'm going to do that, some of you are going to say, well, I can do it with less. That's great, you can. When we sew fairly quickly, and we usually try to get it done fairly quickly, so we don't want to mess around with position too much. We know that we have enough to cover our section, so it just makes it easier, especially if you haven't done a lot of paper piecing. I'm just cutting that angle. I'm going to do that on all 3 of my pieces here. All right, so now we're just going to cut our pieces. And just make sure before you start, make sure that all of your papers, sew side should be up like this. So this is your least darkest, this is your darkest, because this is the outer side of your piece. So your sew side needs to be up. And we're just going to create the angle here on this side. And again, we've cut our pieces bigger so that we have room to play when we're actually putting the pieces onto our unit A. So I'm just going to create that angle like that. And then this one I'm just going to cut right up against the paper. And something that I do now that I have my piece set up for size, I'm just going to take that piece and put it right on top of my next one. And I'm just cutting against the edge of the fabric. So that's going to be 2. Move this over so you can see I'm just moving my fabric straight across. The reason I do this and not use my paper is so that my pieces are all the same size. But if you're more comfortable, if you have a hard time seeing that edge, you can definitely just use your paper as well as a guide. Okay, so we have 4. That's 5. That's going to be 6. That's 7. And 8. So then you're going to take one of these papers, you're going to put it on top of your pile. And again, you're going to make sure that the sew side is at the top. And we're just going to clip that, and that is going into your bag number 1. So you'll find your bag number 1 and you'll put that in there. This is an extra piece, I'll put that with that other extra ombre fabric, and I'm going to keep my label on here just to keep track of my strip, just in case if I need another piece. If I make a mistake with that pile, I have a little bit of extra there to fix. All right, so the strip number 2 is going to be the exact same thing. So my darkest side of my strip again is at the bottom. So when I start this, I want to make sure my sew side is at the top. I'm going to move this down, and I'm just going to cut this again. So again, I'm just going to create my angle here and over here. And I'm just going to move my paper away. And I'm just going to move my fabric. Maybe I'll do this one the other way so you can see both ways to do this. So that's 2 strips. So the other option is just to use your paper and to cut. So that's 3. So whatever works best for you. I just find it easier with the fabrics. It doesn't move around as much as the paper. That's fine. And this should be 8, I think. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And 8, and then you'll put your paper on top, like then making sure that your sew side's at the top. And we'll grab some paper, my paper clip, and clip this. And this one is going into bag number 2. Okay. And then this, again, I'm just going to put my label back on here. And this is going to go into my extra pile. So strip number 3, again, is for section 13. And again, my dark side is at the bottom here. So I want to make sure my sew side is up when I'm cutting. And I'm just going to create my angle on the left side. And then cut the angle on the right side. And you can cut across the way that you prefer. I'm just going to use my fabric. Six, 7, and 8. And again, I'm going to put my paper on top, paper clip, sew side at the top, and this is going into bag number 3. So this is an extra. So again, we're just going to put the label back on here and put it with our extra. Then we're going to grab strip number 4 and we're going to cut 8. And again, we've got our dark side on the bottom. So we're going to take our section 11 templates, and this one again has a square side to it. So again, I'm just going to add 3/4 of an inch to that. So again, I'm measuring from the dashed line. I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch over. All right, So again, we want to have our sew side to the lighter side, so that's going to be up here. And I'm just going to cut this angle. First piece. And again, I'm cutting 8 across. And again, this is on your, if you look at your sheet, section 11, again, we're going to use 3 strips. That means you're cutting 8 across each strip. So I'm just going to move my fabric over here and cut 8 across this strip. Put this together. And this one is going to go into bag number 1. So this is extra. So again, I'm going to put my label on there. You're going to have some extra yardage there to, just in case something happens and you need some extra fabric, you do have enough for one goop, mostly. As the pieces get smaller, you have a little bit more, but, and then for the smaller pieces, you'll have less again, but the object is not to make too many of those. All right, so strip number 5, same as what we just finished doing. You're going to take your papers, section 11, sew side at the top of your strip. We're going to create that angle on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side. Across. This is number 8. So again, we've got extra piece, so we'll put that one, put your extra piece over here. And then we go this one. And this one's going into bag number 2. Then we'll grab strip number 6. And do the exact same thing again, making sure your sew side's at the top. Create that angle. All right, so that's 8. Again, put your paper on top. Paper clip that, and this one is going into bag number 3. All right, so section 9, or strip number 7, sorry, we're going to be using with our section 9, and I forgot to label my strip here, so strip number 6 goes back into our extras. So strip number 7, we're going to cut 8 across as well. So that's going to be this one. And again, this one needs to be trimmed as well. So again, we're just going to cut 3/4 of an inch beyond that dashed line. So like that. And then we're going to again put our sew side on the lightest section side of our strip, which is at the top. I'll do this down. I'll grab my slide over here. So again, straight angle on that side and on the right side. Just folding paper. And then just do a piece over. This is 7. Put this together. And this is going into bag number 1. And again, we're just going to label our strip 7 and put that with our extra. So we'll do the same thing with strip 8 and 9. So just 8 across each of these again. Close at the top. That's 3. That's 4. That's 8. So again, take it on top and take a look at it. And this is going into bag number 2. And label your strip and put it with your extra. And then we'll do the same thing with strip number 9. So this one here, you can see there's a fold on here. This is, I would press this out. I just won't do it because I'm on camera right now, but before I go to sew this piece on, I will definitely be pressing that out. So you can go ahead and press that out at this time. So again, you're just going to put your sew side up here. And create that angle on both sides. That's 3. That's 4. All right, that's 8. So we're just going to put our last template paper on top, flip it together, and this is going into bag number 3. All right, so now we're moving on to template number 7. 8 pieces out of strip number 10 is what we're saying here, and then we're going to do 16 out of your 11. So again, we're going to grab our templates. So this one as well needs to be trimmed. So again, I'm just going to trim 3/4 inch. So again, make sure your sew side's at the top. So like this. And then create an angle on the left side. And the right side. So we've got 8 here. So this is going into your bag number 1. And this is going to be labeled section, strip number 10. So now out of strip number 11, we're going to do 16 across. Create that angle left and right. Okay. So we're going to make 2 piles of 8 here. We're cutting 16 across. We're going to make 2 piles of 8. All right, so this is going to be 8. So I'm going to put a paper on top of this one. And this is going to go into bag number 2. right, so you can see on this one there is no extra, but I'm just still going to keep this like this just to know what the shade that is. And I'm going to clip this on. All right, so now we're moving on to strip number 12. So we're just going to flip our page over here, and we're going to cut 8 from our strip number 12 again, and that's going to be using section number 5. So this one already has the angles cut. And again, we're going to put our sew side at the top. And this one's actually, you can tell, it's a little bit lighter at the top here. Move this down. And we're going to create those 2 angles. And you can see here that I'm cutting about 1/4 of an inch away from my paper. I'm doing that just to give myself a little bit more room. I know that I have lots on this strip because we only need 8 across. So I'm just going to use my fabric so it's the same size. So we're cutting 8 across on this one. I think this is 8, 3, 6, 7, and 8. And then put your paper on top and paper clip. And this one is going into your bag number 1. So this one you have a fair bit left over. So again, we're just going to keep our label on here. And we're going to take our strip number 13 and we're going to cut 16 across this one. So again, make sure your sew side's at the top. And again, we're going to cut 16 across, but we're going to make 2 piles of 8. Okay, that's 8. Put a paper on that pile and paper clip that one, and that one's going to go into your bag number 2. All right, so 8 more. And 8. So this one too, you'll just have a little bit left over. We'll just put our 13 on there. So again, put your paper on and paper clip. And that's going into your bag number 3. All right, so now we've got 14. And we're going to be cutting 24 across. For this one. So again, we're going to be cutting 24, but we're making 3 piles of 8. Okay, I think this is 8, 3, 6, 8. So we're going to put our paper on there. This is going to go into bag number 1. Then we'll cut another 8 for bag number 2. ones are going into bag number 2. And we need another 8 for bag number 3. Four, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this one goes into bag number 3. So this one you have some left over. So we'll stick our label on there. And last strip is for our section number 1. So this one doesn't have a sew side indicated, so I'm just going to put my label so that the writing is right side up. So section 1 is not upside down here, it's the right way. Then we'll create our angles. And we'll make 3 piles of 8. All right, so with 8, you'll clip and put into bag number 1. That's 8. That's going to go into bag number 2. And we'll make our last pile of 8. Alright, and that's 8. And that one will go into your bag number 3. So we have all of our ombre fabrics cut. I'm just going to put our label 15 on this last piece and put it in our extra. So now we're ready to carry on with our background pieces. So this is the fabric that is replacing your B2, which is your wide border, as well as we're using this for A1, B2, B1, and binding. So we're going to cut our outer borders first, which is going to be 8 4.5-inch strips. And that you can cut now or you can cut later if you're not sure how, if you're deciding, if you're going to think maybe you're going to make your borders wider. If you're not sure about that at this point, don't cut these borders right now. I know that we are going to make ours at 4.5, so I'm going to cut mine, but if you're not sure, don't cut those at this point, because there's always a little bit of extra fabric, so you might be able to wiggle another 1/2 inch or inch for each border out of what's left after you've cut for the background, or go get some more fabric or whatever you want to do, depending on how big you want to make your quilt. So if you're not sure what you're doing with your borders at this point, do not cut your borders. If you do, then just go ahead and follow the instructions that we have, which is 8 4.5-inch strips. So we're going to cut those first. Okay, so again, we're going to square up our fabrics first. and my square. So again, I'm just going to put a straight line on my fold at the bottom. And then butt up my ruler against that, and then just make that first cut to square the fabric. So we're cutting 8 4.5-inch strips for the borders. Alright, so we've got our 8 strips for our outer border. I'm just going to fold those, and I'm going to take my border bag and stick these in there as well. Alright, so just put that back over here. Okay, now that we have our borders in our bag, we're going to move on to cutting the sashing pieces between our ombres that we just finished cutting, as well as the background we're going to cut. So we're going to cut the background first, just to get those big pieces out of the way. So that means we need to move back into Judy's pattern. So if you go to page 7 of the Fractured Star pattern, and just in the first column, about 2/3 of the way down, it says cutting borders, and we're looking at fabric B1. So B1 is the one that we want to cut for. That's your background fabric. And for that, we need 4 22.5-inch by width of fabric pieces. So 4 at 22.5. So that's a big piece. So what we're going to do is we need to use a combination of rulers to do that. So I have an 8, my long ruler is 8.5 inches. So the way that I do this is I'll use my square, and I'll use my 24-inch ruler, because we can't cut along the square as it's not long enough for the width of the fabric without folding the fabric. So I'm going to cut against my 8.5. So to figure that out, you're going to take 22.5 minus the 8.5, that equals 14. So I'm going to take 14 inches from my square ruler here and put it on the edge of my fabric. And also just a reminder, if you need to re-square your fabric here after doing several cuts, just go ahead and do that before continuing. So we've got 14 inches on my square, and I've got 8.5 here. So that's going to give me 22.5. So if your ruler is not 8.5, you're just doing the same thing. You're taking 22.5 inches minus whatever size ruler you have. So if it's a 6-inch, you're just going to take 22.5 minus the 6, and whatever the answer is what you're going to be using for this side of the ruler. So mine is 8.5 plus 14 is going to give me 22.5. I need 4 pieces that size. So 4 at 22.5 by width of fabric. So I'm going to cut this one. That's one piece right here. Okay, so we're going to do that again. So we're going to take 14 inches and add 8.5. So that's 2. So again, we're going to take 14 inches off of this one and add 8.5. So that's 3. And 1 more. Take 8 pieces and fold them up. And these are going to go into your bag that you have labeled as background. That's going to go in with your templates. just going to put that to the side for now. We're going to come back to that in a bit. So now we're going to move on to, in Judy's pattern. So now you're going to move back to page 4. The second column at the top says Unit A cutting instructions for fabric A1, and we're going to cut 24 4.5-inch strips. And as you're doing this, you're going to divide those strips into 3 piles of 8. So we're doing 4.5 inches, 24 times, and you're making 3 piles of 8, which is going to give you 24 strips. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that right now. All right, I've got my 24 strips cut, and we've got 3 piles of 8. So the remainder of this fabric is we're gonna just put this in our bag labeled borders, because the rest of this is going to be used for binding and for whatever extra pieces we need in case we need a few extras to fix something. So I'm just going to fold this up, and I'm going to put that into my bag with my borders. All right, so that's that. So now we're going to set these guys up so we can cut our template layout sheets. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open these up, making sure that they're right sides up. So with a batik, that's a little harder to tell, but your fold should be sitting up like this. So we're going to take our 8 strips from our first pile here, and we're going to stack them up. So what I'm doing here is I'm lining up my left edge and my bottom. And again, you can do this at the ironing board as well, just to get rid of this crease right here. And actually I might try and get rid of that, because it's going to end up right in the middle of your template layout sheet. So that's one pile ready to go. So I'm going to get all my piles ready to go here, then we'll carry on with the template layout sheets. All right, I've got my 8 strips of fabric in 3 piles. If you're not figuring out why we have 3 piles of 8 here, it's because we have our 3 bags that we've started with our A3 units. We have 8 units in each bag. That's why we have 8 fabrics in 3 piles. We're going to put one of each of these piles into those bags. So now we're ready to use our template layout sheets. So that's these guys here. So we have to make sure here that you have them in their right piles. Make sure all the number 3s are in a pile, all the number 2s are in a pile. That's these guys here, and number 1s are in a pile. Because you're going to take one of each one, so that's number 3, number 2, and number 1. So you want one of each on each pile. So I'm going to do that for all of my piles. I'm going to put this one here. So, and I cut all of my papers out, but I won't need them all. So we've got number 2 and number 1. So like that. So these, if you cut all of them out like I did, these ones can go in to your pattern bag along with the other extra papers that we put in there before. So I'm just going to stick those in there. All right, so we're just going to space these out evenly, and you just want to put this in the center of your of your strip. You're going to have some fabric on either side of your paper here, top and bottom. That's good. And then we're just going to cut off my selvage, so about 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to put this guy here. So I'm leaving a good 1/4 inch on the end. And I'm going to do the same thing here. You've got lots of fabric, so you can make them longer, that's fine. And then same thing with this one. So we're going to cut this off. So that's the first pile. So now you're going to take your paper clips and you're going to just clip each section. So you've got 1, 2, 3 sections here. So like that. So I'm just putting my paper clip in the center of each section. You'll notice here that I'm also putting the big end of my paper clip on the top of my pile. I always do that because for me that indicates the right side of the fabric. Again, when you're using a batik, it's sometimes hard to tell what the right side is once you've got it cut in a chunk. So I always use the big side of my paper clip indicates the right side of my fabric, and the small side on the other side indicates the wrong side. So same thing with the second pile. You're just going to put a paper clip at each end. So that one's ready to go. And then your third pile, same thing. So we're just going to take our paper clips. All right, so now technically we're supposed to cut these apart right away. I don't do that right away. I do it as I come to each bag. So I'm going to take these big pieces, just pile them up like that, fold them in half, and I'll put them all into one of my bags. So this is bag number 3. So now everything that I need to make my unit A1 in this bag 3 is ready to go. So I'm just going to seal that up. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my second pile. I'm just going to do myself off first. So it's good to do one group at a time and bag it as you're cutting it. This way you make sure that you have all the right parts in your bags. So if you cut them all and leave them all on your table, it's easy to put one in the wrong bag. Alright, so we're going to quickly clip these back together again. So again, just clipping each section. My paper's in the center of my stack. Flip this side. This one. Alright, so these 3 are going to go into the next bag. So I'm just going to grab, this is bag number 2, so I'm just going to put that in there. And we'll close that one up. And then we'll do our last one here. All right, so these three will go into your last bag, which will be bag number 1. You can fold those up and put them in here. So those 3 bags are ready to sew, and we'll get back to that once we've finished cutting our last pieces here. So the next thing we're going to do is cut our background pieces. We're going to go back to your page 7 in Judy's pattern, and we're going to lay out those 4 22.5 by width of fabric pieces of fabric, and I have mine all pressed and stacked. So I'm just going to open these up. All right, so again, I've got to make sure that you're pretty well lined up on one edge. So your left side and then your bottom usually is what I line up. So in the bag that we just pulled this fabric out of, which is your border bag, we're just going to pull out the templates. And we're going to set these up. So if you look at your diagram here at the top of page 7 on the right hand side, they've got your CL units on the left hand side, and they have your CR units on the right hand side. So you're going to take these templates. This big guy goes that way. This guy is coming in this way. So you're kind of staying on half. My fold is right here. Half of these are going on half of your fabric, and the other half are going on the second half. So we want to make sure that these are exact pieces, so they're not going to get trimmed down again. So you want to make sure that these are fully on the fabric. So if we're close to the sides like this, you want to make sure that all 4 layers are underneath that piece. And mine are here. And then this one can come in like that. And if you're feeling any wrinkles under there, you got to make sure you get them out, because that will definitely change the shape of your piece. All right, let's set that up again. So this one goes down here. And you'll notice on your pieces you have a grain line, so you want to make sure you're going with the grain of your fabric. So this one goes like that. And this one comes like this. All right, so I'm going to, so you can use pins to pin these down, or you can use the stapler, and this is where I like to use my stapler. So I'm going to start stapling this one. The reason I like using my stapler for doing stuff like this, the templates, is that I don't have to worry about my ruler on top of pins, so it makes it easier to cut and stay straight. And also, you know for sure that nothing is moving. So I'm going to just cut this right away here. So when you're cutting here, you have to make sure that you are cutting right on the line, because again, these are exact pieces. And again, you just need a straight edge for this. Doesn't matter which ruler you're using, you just want to make sure you're cutting straight. Okay, so I'm just going to move that away. And I am just going to cut I'm going to staple this one down. And I'm just going to cut down here. Just going to cut the side here. Okay, so we'll use this half for the bar, and we'll finish cutting these ones. So I'm just going to cut those apart so that I can staple these. And now I'll just finish cutting right on the line. Right. So these bigger chunks that you have here, you can keep those, put those in your stash, or keep them as extra pieces. They can go into your extra bag. And then don't forget to cut your smart corners here. Cut that off. And I will just leave those staples in for now, and I will just put these pieces back into my background bag. Okay, so this one. This one. And make sure you're cutting on the very outside line, because if you're cutting on the inside, you're cutting off your seam allowance. This one's done. All right, so this one you have finished stapling. Alright, so we've got the CLs cut. So now we're just going to set up for our second half. So I'm just going to slide this over and do the same thing. So this one, this piece is going, your 2 is going here, your CR3 is going across this way, and your number 1 is going over here. So again, watch your grain lines, and staple. I'll show you how to staple. I'll show you how to staple. Make sure you're stapling inside of it and not where you're cutting. This one I'm going to put. So again, make sure you're on top of everything here. So I'm going to staple this end. Put this one in. Okay, so again, I'm just going to cut these apart so I can staple on the inside. Again, just a reminder, you're cutting on the very outside line, and you're cutting on the line exactly, because this is an exact piece. So we have all of our background pieces cut. So those are going to go back into your background bag. And we are done cutting for the fractured star and we are ready to start sewing. So I'll be right back once I'm set up for that.